Planned stakeholder engagement is that process where you plan how to engage the stakeholders that you have already identified. Let's say that again. Planned stakeholder engagement is where we are planning how to keep our stakeholders engaged. Those stakeholders that we have already identified. And I dare say those stakeholders that we have should have done a very solid job in analyzing. Because you do know, not every stakeholder can be managed close. Some stakeholders, you need to just let them be. Give them information when they need it, but stop running after them. Maybe some stakeholders that you try to involve are actually going to cause trouble on the project if you invite them into discussions too early. All right? So you need to keep this in mind. And I want to show you, again, 3 ways that you should be thinking about your stakeholders. The PMI came out with a document, and I'm going to share a link with you because I want you guys to go read this offline. This is not something that we can do here. There's just too much to do here today. So do me a favor and go to PMI's website, follow the link that I'm about to chat in. Please go to that link and save it. And you're going to see a document that the PMI has out here on the Salience Model. I'm going to show it to you very quick here. We don't have as much time today to go into the extra stuff. So I would like you to go to the link. Okay. There's a lot of stuff here. This will probably be about 10 pages if you were to print it. Lots of stuff. And it says planning effective stakeholder management strategies to do the same thing. Planning effective stakeholder management strategies to do the same thing. So this is a precursor to planning. And that's why I'm showing it to you, because as we're going into planning, it is important that you think about the numerous ways you can analyze stakeholders. And that is what should have been done in identify stakeholders. Okay. So if you go all the way down to where we have that Venn diagram, all the way down at the bottom, right here, as you can see, there are 3 bold categories here. And these are the 3 categories that I'm going to talk to you about very quickly before we go back into planned stakeholder engagement. All right. So there are 3 ways, like I said, you can analyze stakeholders. But this one we have not talked about is called the Salience Model. You can analyze stakeholders from the angle of power. What kind of power do they have? Do they have coercive power to punish you or punish other people or punish other stakeholders? What kind of power do they wield as far as the project is concerned? We call that power. The second one is legitimacy. Are they legitimately involved? They could be involved from various perspectives. The general public is an example. Why would the general public be a legitimate stakeholder when the factory being built is not in their portfolio? They don't have shares from that company. Why would they be interested in what's going on? They would be because that factory is about to pollute the environment where they live. Well, they are legitimately involved. They have a legitimate concern. The last category is urgency. This deals with a time factor regarding that stakeholder's response. So you could have a supplier who is an urgently classified stakeholder. They need to deliver a part or the project falls apart. So these 3 categories, power, urgency, and legitimacy, when they all come together, you realize who the big dog is. And the big dog, we call the big dog a definitive stakeholder. They have the power, they are legitimately involved, and there's an urgency about them. Now, I would love to go into hours of discussion about this. It's a luxury. We don't have that time. You saw how big the document PMI is. So we cannot go as far as I would have liked. I hope to put up a video about this eventually, but I want you to go back and read the PMI's online document where we talk about power, legitimacy, and urgency. So I want you to think about it with a mnemonic. Pull, P-U-L, simple. So if on the exam you are asked, what do you call a stakeholder that is powerful, urgent, and legitimately involved? You know it's a definitive stakeholder, number 7. You see what I'm saying? Then you have number 8, which is a non-stakeholder. This is someone who is not legitimately involved, they have no urgency about them, and they have no power. This is one of the ways, one of the 3 ways talked about in the PMBOK guide. So I'd like you to follow me real quick here, because last time we met, we didn't do this area justice, and I told you that we were going to revisit it. So here we are. Let's read on page 513. It says, Salience Model describes classes of stakeholders based on assessments of their power, that's level of authority, or the ability to influence the outcomes of the project, urgency, need for immediate attention, either time constrained or relating to the stakeholders' stake in the outcome, and legitimacy, their involvement is appropriate. There is an adaptation of the Salience Model that substitutes proximity for legitimacy, applying to the team and measuring their level of involvement with the work of the project. So little things like that, where there could be substitutions in a model, you want to pay close attention to that as you're studying. That is fair game on your PMP exam. It's as though they go right to the bottom of the barrel where no one would ever search, and they throw things into questions. So pay close attention to these, okay? The Salience Model is useful for large, complex communities of stakeholders where there are complex networks of relationships with the community. It is also useful in determining the relative importance of the identified stakeholders. So it could be a web of multiplicity. Think about a case where such a company, as I talked about, is building a factory near you. You would be concerned, especially if you know they are heavy polluters of the air, pumping up smoke into the atmosphere. You would be. So if the environmentalists get involved and they start marching around the town, they're legitimately involved. You see, they are stakeholders as well. You could also think about religious leaders who are aware that a nightclub of ill repute in other cities is about to be built. Again, religious leaders, those are people we need to think about, that they may have some power over the general public, over other stakeholders. So there's a web of multiplicity where we talk about Salience Model. It's a very interesting topic, and I would urge you to take a look at that document, both for your practitioner curiosity and the PMP exam. But like I said, what I would expect if this is mentioned on the exam is understanding what exactly the 3 components of the Salience Model are: power, urgency, and legitimacy, okay? I wish I could talk about it more, but we're short of time. The next thing I want to talk about is on the same page, and we kind of looked at it, we dabbled into it last week, but again, I want to crave your indulgence to read up about this a little bit more. There is a model. I'm going to show you the model from IPMA, which is a different institution of project management, but they had an image on their site I found would be quite interesting to look at. So last week, I showed you guys the Stakeholder Cube, right? And we talked about the different dimensions. We talked about power, we talked about interest, and we talked about attitude on this axis, see? And you could flip the axis in different ways. If you wanted to put power here instead, and you wanted to put attitude there, you could. And that's exactly what IPMA did. They put power on the Z, attitude on the Y, and interest on the X. So I want to show you a quick representation of how the model they've shown, how it falls on top of this. So if you place their model on top of that cube I just showed you, what you can see is we have those that have a high level of power, a high level of interest, but a bad attitude. See, high level of power, high level of interest, but their attitude is not good. Or those that have a good attitude. And they've given them additional names. I'll just circle some of these interesting names. This one they call the sleeping giant. That has a high level of power, a good attitude, but their interest is low. See? This one is called the irritant. High level of interest. As far as the power goes, they don't really have that much, but their attitude is negative. See? So you have those that are insignificant. You have those that are influential. See, you have those that are passive. And this is a model I would, again, like you to go read up more about. It is not on the PMI site this time. This is on IPMA site. IPMA is, to put it mildly, you could call them a competitor of the PMI. And IPMA was founded as a result of someone in the PMI, involved with the PMI, in fact, responsible for the PMP certification, just having enough. He had had enough, and that was it. So he went ahead and formed this other organization. So I'm gonna give you a link to it. Again, it's only for this chapter. I'm not asking you to go to IPMA and go join IPMA. But I just want you to go look up their Stakeholder Cube. All right, so here we go. Please take a look at it. And I'll just show you the image of IPMA's site so you know you're on the right track when you get there. This is what it looks like. So when you get to IPMA's site, there you go, you see it. And a little bit of background about the image. But the image is actually from someone who is PMI affiliated as well, an entity where this whole concept came from. And they're very interesting concepts, but in all honesty, they're a little bit outside of the enormity of stuff we have to talk about today. So I don't want to go too much into it. I think I already have. So let me save myself and come out of it. The last piece I want to remind you about is the power interest grid. So now you guys have a concept about stakeholder analysis and stakeholder representation around these three models. One, the power interest grid, and I expect you to be able to use these in your companies. You should be able to draw out a power interest grid, have a wholesome conversation with your team members about who has a high level of power. Why do you say so? What about a high level of interest? Or you could also say, who has a high level of not necessarily power on the org chart, but who is influential? So you could have influence impact grid as well. I also want to point your attention to something you should read under identify stakeholders. Let me just give you the pages to focus on. This is under data representation. Again, it's on page 512. And under power interest grid, you see they also mentioned power influence grid or impact influence grid. Each of these techniques supports a grouping of stakeholders according to their level of authority, power. But bear in mind, power is not influence. There's a difference. Authority, what you are conferred, you're given the power to do something. Level of concern about the project's outcomes, interest, ability to influence the outcomes of the project. That's really what leadership is. Leadership isn't about power, you see, it's about influence. So if someone is an influential leader, an influential person, you could look at them from a different standpoint. For example, a union boss, a union leader does not necessarily have to be at the top of the org chart. You could have someone who is in the machine room, but they wield a lot of influence, not power, but influence. You see, they may also have legitimacy. They can impose their will on the affairs of the company. These are ways you need to be thinking about stakeholder management. All right, so that is the power interest grid. Know the other names for the exam. We talked about the stakeholder register. What is the thing you get out from identified stakeholders? We've talked about the Salience Model. Just be familiar with it. Don't sweat it. Don't go crazy over it. Remember, I'm not guaranteeing it's going to come out, but it is good to understand at a high level, okay? And last but not least, the Stakeholder Cube, all right? Power interest grid, Salience Model, Stakeholder Cube. Now, beyond that, there are ways we could describe stakeholders, okay? If this is you in the firm, we could talk about your relationship to these stakeholders in different ways. Again, a topic that is smuggled in to data representation. So this is you upwards to senior management. You could refer to that as a direction of influence. It says here on page 513, this classifies stakeholders according to their influence on the work of the project or the project team itself. Stakeholders can be classified in the following ways: upward, senior management of the performing organization or customer organization, sponsor and steering committee; downward, subordinates, the team or specialists contributing knowledge or skills in a temporary capacity. We have outward, which I will show like this. And outward is to stakeholder groups and their representatives outside the project team, such as suppliers, government departments, the public end users, regulators. And we have your peers on either side. And these are ways you can classify these directions, okay? We also have one that is called sidewards. So when we say peers or across, we're talking about sidewards. It says, those who collaborate with the project manager in sharing resources or information. So when we talk about peers, you got to remember that this is sidewards, whether it's going to that angle or that angle, okay? Management is up, subordinates down, temporary teams down, and this will just help you understand better what PMI is talking about on the exam. Last but not least, we have prioritization. Prioritizing stakeholders may be necessary for projects with a large number of stakeholders, where the membership of the stakeholder community is changing frequently, or when the relationships between stakeholders and the project team or within the stakeholder community are complex. So, again, page 512 and 513, okay? Now we have caught up and 20 minutes have gone. So if you have questions, I'm going to ask that you hold your fire. I will take them at the end, but for now we need to get done with content. So let's jump into our major process for today. As usual, I show you this every week or every session, and right now we're moving the needle actually from where it's showing here and advancing to the next process. So this is going to advance to our last three. What a scary looking image. How far we've come. It will look scary to some, but you guys were part of it. You are all part of it. All right. So planned stakeholder engagement. What is it? We've got our stakeholder register. We are now planning how to engage our stakeholders. So we get a stakeholder engagement plan. Planned stakeholder engagement is the process of developing approaches to involve project stakeholders based on their needs, their expectations, their interests, and potential impact on the project, The key benefit is that it provides an actionable plan to interact effectively with stakeholders. This process is performed periodically throughout the project as needed. What you need to remember is stakeholders change. They do not stay the same. As a result, you will find yourself analyzing stakeholders throughout the project, planning for those new stakeholders throughout the project, and so on. An effective plan that recognizes the diverse information needs of project stakeholders is developed early in the project lifecycle and is reviewed and updated regularly as the stakeholder community changes. Now, that is a very big statement because people get confused when they take a look at the inputs to identify stakeholders. So if we say, this is identify stakeholders here, and this is plan stakeholder engagement, I'll just call it PSE, plan stakeholder engagement has a feedback loop. And that feedback loop contains your stakeholder engagement plan. See? Your stakeholder engagement plan, even though created in plan stakeholder engagement, is going to be a feedback loop into identify stakeholders in the next iteration of stakeholder identification. And that is exactly what they're saying. An effective plan that recognizes the diverse information needs of project stakeholders is developed early and updated regularly. It is updated and it is used in the identification of stakeholders. Let's take a quick read. Again, this is one of those chapters where we are going to be going in and out of chapters. So you want to stay with me real close on this one, okay? So we're going to 13.1 again to plan stakeholder, no, I beg your pardon, identify stakeholders. But we're going to talk about how planned stakeholder engagement is relevant to this process. So let's take a look at page 509. It says, the project management plan is not available when initially identifying stakeholders. However, once it has been developed, the project management plan components include 1, communications management plan. Communications and stakeholder engagement are strongly linked. Hold on to that thought. Information included in the communications management plan is a source of knowledge about the project stakeholders. The stakeholder engagement plan, it says, the stakeholder engagement plan identifies the management strategies and actions required to effectively engage stakeholders. So I don't see it as a surprise if you got such a plan and you're identifying stakeholders in an iterative fashion. Of course you should use your stakeholder engagement plan. It just makes sense. Use everything you've got. Perhaps the way you engage stakeholders is linked to the way you identify them. If you identify stakeholders by using other stakeholders' knowledge and awareness to get them involved, well, you're setting yourself up for success right from the get-go. So the stakeholder engagement plan, I really want to make it clear that this is not used only from planning forward. No, you would use it even in initiating as an input. You got to keep these things in focus. All right, so let's take a look at what we've got here. The inputs to plan stakeholder engagement. We got the project charter, and if you're following me on page 509, it says the project charter identifies the key stakeholder list. Wrong page, I beg your pardon. That is not the correct reference. Let's go to page 518. So this is one of those that I think may have been updated somewhat, but let's read. Here's the relevance. It says, the project charter contains information on the purpose, objectives, and success criteria that can be taken into consideration when planning how to engage stakeholders. That's page 518. And I think this actually bears some repeating. So the reason why I am very particular about correcting the relevance is because you could get a question wrong if you choose the wrong relevance. So the project charter is an input to identify stakeholders for a totally different reason than it is for planned stakeholder engagement. You get what I'm saying? So for identify stakeholders, we have the project charter because it contains a stakeholder list. But here we have the project charter as an input for other reasons. It says here, the project charter contains information on the project purpose, objectives, and success criteria. You see, the success criteria that can be taken into consideration when planning how to engage stakeholders. So if you know the success criteria that is tied to a stakeholder, that could be a way you engage them, you see. So all of these things are for a purpose. This is not random. It is very deliberate when the PMI puts this stuff in here. All right, so page 518, I hope you're following along. The next thing we have is the project management plan. And it says here we have the resource management plan, the communications management plan, the risk management plan that we could consider for different reasons. But I don't want to get into those reasons just at this time. It's stuff you guys could read up. We have one that is conspicuously absent, and that is project documents. So I'm just going to read it for you. This has a little bit of a omission here, but let's follow in the PMBOK guide just to get an idea. So project documents, the most important project document in this process is the stakeholder register. So the stakeholder register, that contains your list of project stakeholders, including additional classification data and other information. In fact, to be honest, I find that on page 519 to be a little bit of bad language. We shouldn't call it a list anymore. It's a register. It's different from what came from the project charter, okay? So as you guys get deeper into this stuff, your eyes will be open up when you're reading this, and your eyes will be so open, you'll wonder, why did PMI say that? Why are you calling it a list? It's a register. Call it what it is. Don't confuse people, you see. So the stakeholder register is the major document that's going to help you here. It has all the analysis and stuff in it. We also have agreements, and it says, when planning for the engagement of contractors and suppliers, it obviously makes sense to consider those agreements, right? We also have EEFs, and we have OPAs. So let's go back to our image here. And this time I'm going to show you the much larger map, which is more consistent with what has been corrected across the board. So let's use this. All right. So we've covered project charter, project management plan, project documents. We have agreements, which we covered, EFs and OPAs. A lot of people forget that their sellers or vendors are also stakeholders. So these are some of the people we're considering here. All right, let's move into the tools and techniques. Under the tools and techniques, we have expert judgment, we have data gathering, benchmarking. And when they mention benchmarking here, honestly, it's a bit of a stretch. But what PMI is trying to say is the way stakeholders were managed, the way stakeholders' engagement, rather, was managed on a previous project in a previous circumstance could be used as a benchmark. It could. So especially in communal projects, the way the community was handled on a previous project, it could be a basis, but it's not every single project that fits this appropriate use of the term benchmarking. Let's read. And it says under data gathering, page 520, the results of stakeholder analysis are compared with information from other organizations or other projects that are considered to be world-class. See? So that is the irrelevance of benchmarking, but they could have done a better job of explaining that it has to do with certain stakeholders being engaged. If you did a great job, or let's say we're an oil and gas company, and let's say Shell did such a great job during the oil spill many years ago. I want to look at how they did it. How did they manage the community in that locale? Well, we could get that as a benchmark, and if such an unfortunate event befell a company, they could use that as a benchmark. Or maybe you've managed several projects in your firm in the past, and maybe a client that you had a lot of trouble with is the same client now. Well, you can use the benchmarks from the past for the current project, the performance of the past as a benchmark for the current project. That's what they're really talking about. All right. Data analysis, really quick here on page 521. It says analysis of current assumptions and constraints may be conducted in order to tailor appropriate engagement strategies. We have root cause analysis. Root cause analysis identifies underlying reasons for the level of support of project stakeholders in order to select the appropriate strategy to improve their level of engagement. We have decision making. It says decision making techniques that can be used for planned stakeholder engagement should not be limited to prioritization or ranking. For those of you that are just coming, I'm on a roll. I do not want to answer any questions at the moment because I need to get you guys to dry land so that I don't keep you behind. So excuse my urgency. So that's decision making, prioritization and ranking. Next one, under data representation, this is the one I really want to go in on. This one is called the Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Matrix. Matrix, that's really what it should read, but it's being blocked by the other panel, so I'll just reveal it now. So Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Matrix, I call this the SEAM. The PMI here on page 521, there are two things that they mention under data representation. One is mind mapping, and we've talked about mind mapping in the past. We're not going there now, but we're going into the SEAM. I call it the SEAM, S-E-A-M. Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Matrix. Take a look at page 522. If you look at page 522, you see an image like this. This helps you create the plan for how to engage stakeholders and optimally control their engagement. So think about it. You got a stakeholder who is currently unaware. What do we mean by unaware? Let's read. An unaware stakeholder, in my mind, I just say someone who's clueless. But on page 521, it says unaware of the project and potential impacts. They're a stakeholder, or they're clueless. They're unaware. The question is, how do we get them to move from here to here? How do we get them to move from unaware to supportive? Or a stakeholder who is resistant. It's one thing to be clueless. It's another thing to be well aware, but dig your heels in and say, I ain't doing it. I don't support you. Let's take a read here. It says, resistant, aware of the project and potential impacts, but resistant to any changes that may occur as a result of work or outcomes of the project. These stakeholders will be unsupportive of the work or outcomes of the project. They could even be termed in some instances as negative stakeholders. But again, our job as a project manager is how do we get them? How do we get them from being currently, C is for current, D is for desired? How do we get them from where they currently are to where we desire them to be? Last but not least, stakeholder 3, exactly where we need them to be. They're in a leading role. That's where we desire them to be. That's where they are. Let's keep them there. How do we keep a stakeholder in a leading role? With all the multiple priorities changing, that's your job as a project manager, to figure out how do I keep Phill, my stakeholder, right where I need him? How do I ensure that his level of engagement doesn't wane? That's why project managers have a tough job. So all of that stuff is on page 521. Neutral is aware of the project, but neither supportive nor unsupportive. Supportive, aware of the project and potential impacts, and supportive of the work and its outcomes. And leading, it says, aware of the project and potential impacts and actively engaged in ensuring the project is a success. So if on the exam you are asked, which category is category 4 in a stakeholder engagement assessment matrix? You got to remember it's not leading, it's supportive. You got to know the order. And I have a mnemonic for you to remember the order. It's a little bit of a funny mnemonic, but it's a play on words. Earns less, but earns less. It's a play on words for those of you that use mnemonics. All right, so if you remember that on the exam, I think it will do you some good, because this is the major thing. I mean, when you look at PMI's account of the stakeholder engagement plan, it is so lackluster. It has nothing in it. The substance of what is in the stakeholder engagement plan lies in the strategies that you craft for the engagement of stakeholders. So it's on a case-by-case basis. If you take a look at page 522, it says, the stakeholder engagement plan is a component of the project management plan that identifies the strategies and actions required to promote productive involvement of stakeholders in decision-making and execution. It can be formal or informal, highly detailed or broadly framed, based on the needs of the project and the expectations of stakeholders. The stakeholder engagement plan may include, but is not limited to, specific strategies or approaches for engaging with individuals or groups of stakeholders. So my friends, on the screen here, I just put up my own interpretation of what this could look like. You have the stakeholders, you have some of the information from the stakeholder register here, but really the big thing for you as a project manager when working with your team in the real world is to strategize. All right, this stakeholder, assessment of their impact is high. How do I get them to support the project? Gain buy-in from CEO, inner circle members, to highlight project success or issues at the CEO's inner circle meeting. Boom, that's it. That's your specific strategy for a specific stakeholder. And that's why the PMI, they don't have so much stuff in this, because their thoughts are probably, well, it differs on a case-by-case basis. All right, great. So in closing this section, my friends, I'd like you to take a shot at this one. I'll give you a minute and then we'll move on. Go for it. And I'm foolishly showing you the answer. Well, how convenient. Let's see if I can do that again the proper way with whatever is left of this quiz. And I do apologize for that. That was not intentional. I know I'm extremely gung-ho on you guys getting stuff right, but that is not my modus operandi, as you probably know. All right, so the answer to this one is tricky. Some of you still got it wrong, even though the answer was on the screen. The purpose for this question is to sensitize you to the fact that the language between management and engagement is different. The PMI used to call it planned stakeholder management, but not anymore. And their logic was, it is not planning how to manage stakeholders, it's planning how to engage stakeholders. All right, so well done. Thank you for being a sport, and let's take a look at our next one. Here's the next question. I will relaunch the poll, and here's your next question. Let's see if I can do this the right way. The power interest grid classification model for stakeholders analysis suggests all right, my friends, 6 seconds left. 5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome, Jackie, Adrian, Candace, Chris, Delita, Doran, Fabian, Harley, Phil, Luke, Kathy, Margaret, Michelle, Muzaffar, Nancy, Pedro, Sadaftina, and Tony. Good to have all of you. I think I'm missing a couple of people, but I guess I'll see them tomorrow. Actually, I'm missing more than a couple. I'm missing like 3 people. All right, 3, 2, and 1. Let's end the poll. Share the results. Oh dear, what have we here? What have we here? This is not what I was expecting. That doesn't sound very encouraging, does it? Well, unfortunately, majority did not get this one correct. Majority did not get this correct. The answer to this question, my friends, is option not A, not D, not C, but B. So let's talk about them one by one, okay? I'm just going to type in what you really should do with each group. High power, high interest stakeholders. No, you should manage close, okay? That's A. The stakeholders A, you should manage close. No, you don't keep them informed, you manage close, okay? D, low power, low interest stakeholders. These are the ones you monitor. You don't manage them close, you monitor them, okay? So we need to go back to this chart. I really think this is awesome that we did this because we're uncovering gaps. See, and things like this, they come back to bite us on the exam. So this is actually a good exercise. All right, C, low power and high interest stakeholders. These are the ones that we keep informed. And for option B, you keep these guys satisfied. Keep the guys and girls here satisfied. That should be your strategy, my friends. So let me show you one more time. Let's go down memory lane. I'm going to show you that power interest grid. It is important that you read it. It's not in the PMBOK guide, but in our essentials book. Oh my goodness, is that the time? Really? My, oh my. Time is flying. Page 472. Okay, 472. And you know what? This will actually be a good little exercise for you. You can quiz yourself. You know, on page 474, we've got a, what do I call it? We've got this, this one right here, which could be, you see that? The grid. You could actually do a little exercise with that grid and just try to put these terms in. But let me go back and show you what you really should have been thinking about. You should have been thinking about it like this. In the grid, this grid. Remember, I sent you guys this grid last time. Monitor, keep satisfied, manage close, keep informed. You got to know this grid. This grid has been notorious. Okay? Could show up. All right. So my friends, let's move on. All that talk about the salience and the cube in the beginning, it's really taken a lot of time. I can hardly believe how much the time has gone by. But let's try and get to our final process right now. And our final process is manage stakeholder engagement. Okay? This will go quick. It will go quick. It's a deadbeat process. You know what I mean by a deadbeat process? It's a process that does not give you anything new as an output. Now, that's a relief. However, managed stakeholder engagement is a very, very similar process to manage communications, and we're going to find out why. Managed stakeholder engagement is the process of communicating. Uh-oh. Did they just use the communication word in stakeholder? Yep, it's not the first time. But thank goodness it's not just communicating, because that would have been a problem. Working with stakeholders to meet their needs and expectations. So let's think about it like this. It's all about the intent. Get it? The intent defines the process. So let me give you two scenarios really quick. One scenario, I am communicating with my stakeholder, giving them tons of information, tons of information. Why am I doing that? I'm giving them information because I promised I would give them a report every week, come rain, come shine. I promised I would hold a meeting for them and give them status updates, come rain, come shine. So I'm communicating, I'm giving them updates, I'm doing all of this. Okay? That is managed communications, where you are communicating with your stakeholder because you promised them you would. It's out of obligation. But in this process, managed stakeholder engagement, you are communicating to engage. Get it? It's the intent, the why. Now, there could be a superimposition. You are communicating to share information that you promise, but at the same time, you're also doing it strategically to engage your stakeholder. You see, a lot of project managers, they do not intentionally engage stakeholders. They just send out information. But when you're doing it with an intent to engage, you follow up by ensuring they understood, they listened, they read, and you work with the stakeholder to keep them engaged. That's the difference. They both involve communication. One is an intent to satisfy a plan, satisfy a contract, to provide a report. The other is smarts, because you know that report is also going to be an engagement point. So you're communicating and you're working with them. And that's exactly what you're doing in this process. You're not just communicating to fulfill the obligation. No, you are communicating to engage. You fulfill the obligation in managed communications, but you engage them here. You see, the key benefit of this process is that it allows the project manager to increase support. That's it. That's what you're trying to do. Let me show you really quick here. And it's really unfortunate we don't have much time, because this could take me another 30 minutes, I tell you. You know, when I get really into this stuff, it takes a while, because I usually show all 4 processes that throw people off. You know the 4 processes that throw people off? Manage communications, monitor communications, manage stakeholder engagement, monitor stakeholder engagement. It has people scratching their heads. So I usually do all 4, but not to worry. I've got videos on YouTube. If you search difference between managed communications, monitor communications, it'll come up with my stuff. Manage stakeholder engagement, monitor communications. Not very many people have explained it to this degree. So let's go to, I want to show you, you don't have to go there. I'll read it to you. I'm going to read the key benefit of managed communications to you, just so you get it. The key benefit of managed communications is that it enables an efficient and effective information flow. People could get information and not act on it. People could get information and not be bothered. So what is missing? Working with the stakeholder, you see? So this is really the main part of this process that I want you to get. If you know what you're doing and the intent, the rest is easy. See? So the key benefit of this process is not information flow. No. This one is that it allows the project manager to increase support, minimize resistance. In other words, you're acting as a risk manager to increase the benefits of that stakeholder's involvement. That's what it's all about. And you're trying to minimize their resistance. You're trying to neutralize the risk of them not supporting you. See that? So managing stakeholder engagement helps to ensure that stakeholders clearly understand the project, the goals, the objective, the benefits, the risks of the project, as well as how their contribution will enhance project success. If people don't know how much they could influence the project by getting involved, then they ain't going to get involved. So you're going to have to move them, move the heart. That's what it's all about, okay? I called it a deadbeat process because there's really nothing unique from it. If we take a look at this breakdown, it's lackluster. It doesn't have really anything unique except one thing. You might want to mark this down. This is the only unique thing about this process. The only unique thing about it is ground rules. That is the only thing, ground rules. So let's go to a more elaborate breakdown where this is displayed properly. So the inputs, your project management plan, but look, in your project management plan, you've got the communications management plan and you've got the stakeholder engagement plan. You need these 2 things. You have these 2, you're good. Everything else is gravy. Okay? When you engage stakeholders, stakeholders want to know, what did you do with my change request? Did you do it? What about the issue that I brought up last week? You do it? If you've learned any lessons from the past about engaging stakeholders, then it would make sense to use this. Also, stakeholders sometimes, they like to know which lessons you have learned, and that keeps them engaged. So there are many multiple purposes of these inputs. What about the stakeholder register? Well, that has the names of the people, the entities that you're trying to engage. See? The only unique thing here that you have not seen previously, ground rules. Everything else is same old, same old. We use communication skills, feedback, to understand our stakeholders better, to give them feedback, to understand them. But this is not feedback with an intent to improve. This is not the improvement landmark in stakeholder engagement. That's in the process for Monday. We'll talk about that on Monday. But for this is where we are doing. We're not checking, we're just doing. So this is our doing process, okay? Interpersonal skills, conflict management, there could be conflict between stakeholders, cultural awareness, being aware of cultures to engage your stakeholders. You know, there's usually a video I show my students when I do this elaborate leadership class. And there was a stakeholder from somewhere in Asia where eel is a very, very big meal. It's a big do. So part of the culture previously had been to take the stakeholder to go and have some eel sushi and all that. And this new project manager was so ignorant, totally oblivious to the culture, and refused to take the stakeholder out to have eel. And the stakeholder said, okay, then I'm pulling the project. I'm not doing it. I'm not working with you anymore. So we need to be culturally competent. Or you go to a country where negotiating is a big deal, and you don't want to negotiate even just to be a sport, culturally inept, culturally inept. So there is a term that is used when we talk about this, and it's called being ethnocentric. We don't want to be ethnocentric. We want to understand cultures where we are. You get what I mean? We want to understand cultures. We want to blend in. We want to respect that. And we want our stakeholders to feel it. All right. Almost done. Almost done. Taking a look at the outputs, we have change requests, which we've seen a dozen times. Project management plan updates. You're going to update your communications management plan, as you can see. You could update your stakeholder engagement plan as a result of this process based on feedback that you get. And things you observe. And of course, we have updates to these documents. All right. So before you guys zoom off, because I know it's Friday, there's stuff to be done, why don't you take a shot at this? And, oh, there we go again. There we go again. This is not working today, is it? This is not working. I have shared the answer for the second time in a row. Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear. Okay. I wish I had another magic trick up my sleeve to give you a second question. Let's see. Let's see if I can do this properly. Hopefully this time everyone will get it right though, because last time I did this, we had an issue, didn't we? All right, here's your next question. And here is your poll. Let us relaunch. And there you go. I'll give you a quick minute and we'll be out of here in no time. All right, my friends, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's end the poll. Share the results. And for this one, I want you to follow me to page 523 really quick. Page 523. What does it say? Managed stakeholder engagement is a process of communicating and working with stakeholders to meet their needs and expectations, address issues, and foster appropriate stakeholder involvement. The key benefit of this process is that it allows the project manager to increase support and minimize resistance from stakeholders. So when you read through this, you realize that avoiding potential concerns that have not yet become issues is the worst worded option. All the other options are things we do, but B is bogus. And that is why majority went with B. Very good call. It's a very slimy one, but you really need to be all over the definition. See, avoiding potential, potential. You're not in their mind. You don't know. So the best option to choose is B. Thank you all very much. I do not want to keep you any further. If you need to jump off the ship, well, it's 1 o'clock. I'll see you tomorrow. Make sure you come prepared. The final 4 in risk and everything in quality. All right? I will answer any questions that they are. Thank you very much and bye.